welcome to this free live session brought to you by TalentSprint. Now, going by your request, I've chosen this topic. And if you're not into reading or generally English is a challenge for you, RC can be such a turn off. But what if you know some strategies, or if there was a way around? Why not attempt this question type, right? So in today's session, we will be looking at 3 ways, right, or 3 steps that you need to know to approach this particular question type. And towards the end, I'll also be sharing some tips. Yeah, but before we get started, just wanted to understand how's your preparation for the IBPS PO prelims. So let's get started. Now, the 3 ways that I'm talking about, I want to call it as the save time approaches, right? These are things that I can keep in mind. So in order to save time, because one of the first thoughts that come to students when they're approaching reading comprehension is, it's too big. It's going to take up a lot of my time, right? So I'm not going to attempt it. So we need to break that myth, reading comprehension. Let me share the PPT. Okay, so we're getting started. The number 1 way, right, to approach reading comprehension is this. We're going to attempt vocabulary questions first, right? So couple of things I want you to keep in mind when it comes to vocabulary questions. So when I say vocabulary questions, I am referring to synonyms, right, antonyms, and I'm also referring to idiomatic expressions or phrases, right, idioms and phrases. So as you're aware of the pattern, right, you have a short passage with 5 questions, you have a long passage with 10 or 15 questions. Now, usually in the long passage, you will have words highlighted in the passage, and then they're going to be asked in the questions. So out of the options given, choose the word that is closest in meaning to the given word or opposite in meaning to the given word, synonyms and antonyms, right? Or there could be an expression in the passage where they say, what does this mean? You have 4 or 5 options and you have to choose from that. So the first approach, right, that you can take, attempt the vocabulary questions first. Quickly finish that. The reason why I say this is, 1, you don't necessarily need to read the entire passage to do that. Yeah. So let's look at a couple of questions to understand this a little more in detail. So this particular paragraph that you see is taken from a short passage. It's about 330 word count, right? And then there is a phrase highlighted in the passage. If you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th line, right? It says shot in the arm, right? And then look at the question. It says, what does the phrase shot in the arm as used in the passage mean? Right? And I have 4 options: shock, fear, encouragement, anxiety. Now, this is a phrase that you could be familiar with, but if you're not familiar with, let's look at the passage, right? Kanha, before you give me the answers, right, understand the approach first, and then you can give me the answers. I'm going to ask you guys for the answers. Look at this. It says the idea behind vocabulary questions is also to look at surrounding context and the context in which it appears, right? So it says this would come as a big shot in the arm for the investors. Now, what is that this referring to? We need to read the sentence before, right? Let's read the sentence before that. Starting, some of India's leading national banks have posted a net profit rise of more than 40% over the last quarter amid global turmoil, right? And this would come as a big shot in the arm for the investors and consumers of these banks, blah, blah, blah. So, if I read the previous sentence, is it a positive sentence or a negative sentence? Some of India's leading national banks have posted a net profit rise of more than 40% over the last quarter. It's a positive sentence, right? It gives me a positive meaning. So obviously, this is going to be an encouragement because amid global turmoil, so around the world, there is a problem happening, but still India is able to show some profit. So don't you think that would be an encouragement rather than a shocking news or something that they have to be fearful about or anxious about? Right? So what we've done here is, like I said, vocabulary questions, this one is pertaining to a phrase, right? So just looking at the context, I'm able to figure out the answer, and the answer is C. Yeah, right? So just for you to understand shorten the arm, I just thought I'll give you a example sentence. So for example, if I say the pep talk by the president, right? I'm giving you a random example. The pep talk by the president was a real shot in the arm for all the people, right? So here again I'm saying a real shot in the arm. It was very encouraging for them. Are you following? Yes. Let's look at a couple of vocabulary questions pertaining to synonyms and antonyms. Now, these sort of questions, the question that you see in front of you is taken from a larger passage, right? 450 word count. So usually the long passages, the word count is about anywhere between 450 to even 550, 650, 750 sometimes. And you will have 10 or 15 questions, right? So in those questions, at least 2 or 3 will be synonyms, 2 or 3 will be antonyms. So let's look at this. Choose the word which is most nearly the same in meaning as the word given in bold as used in the passage, right? So emerged and surveyed are words highlighted in the passage. And another thing that makes it easier for us is because these words are already highlighted. They are in bold in the passage, right? Now look at this. Do you really need to read the passage to understand the synonym of this word emerged? Look at the options: divided, reunited, born, surfaced. Out of these options, what do you think is the answer? What's the word that is closest in meaning to the word emerged? So my options are divided, reunited, born, and surfaced. Are you sure it's invented? Okay, now I am a little surprised, but nevertheless, if you're still having doubt, you're not too sure, right? We have the next one also, surveyed. So one other thing that you can do is, I thought it was an easy word, emerged, but apparently it's not, looking at the answers that I'm getting. What we can do is, we can quickly go look at the context and see what meaning it gives in the context, right? Can we do that? Let's do that. So emerged is here. Reading. During a 2-day meeting later this week in a stately neo-Baroque building in Tokyo, 9 men may vote to end one of the oldest periods in the history of central banking and send one of the clearest signals yet that Japan's economy has finally emerged from 15 years of stagnation. Right? So this word in the context gives me what? They're talking about, understand the context, right? It's talking about Japan was in 15 years of stagnation, so it has finally come out of that 15 years of stagnation. So now go back, look at the options and tell me what is the closest word in meaning to emerged here. Did Japan invent something? The closest word in meaning to emerged here in the context is surfaced, right? What do you mean by surfaced? When you say something has surfaced, means it's come into existence. So emerged here or surfaced here means basically to become known or prominent, to become prominent. So after 15 years of stagnation, Japan has been able to come out into the open. Right. So it's kind of surfaced. Surveyed. Now again, let's look at our options. We need a synonym for this. Audited, measured, counted, apprised, and interviewed. What do you think is the closest in meaning? Again, if you're a little confused between audited, measured, or even interviewed, let's go back and look at the context. We always rely on the context, right? Surveyed. Let's read. Second, the rate hike is by no means guaranteed. The Bank of Japan could wait until its next meeting in August or beyond. But out of 41 analysts and traders surveyed by Reuters last week, 29 said they expect an increase at this week's meeting. So in the context, please keep in mind when it comes to vocabulary questions, the funny thing about English is one word can have different meanings in different contexts, right? That's why it's important for us to rely on the word from the context. So in this context, what meaning is surveyed bringing? People are responding to something. 28 said they expect an increase at this works meeting, which means they were asked something and they responded back, right? So in this context, what can be the closest in meaning to surveyed from the given options? Right? The closest word in meaning from the given options or from the context is interviewed. Right? Somebody was posed a particular question, right? And they responded back. 28 said so and so. So audit, usually I kind of relate it to, examining or verifying or correcting the financial accounts of something. Survey on the other hand is, you can survey a couple of students to know what their music preference is, right? So in the context, that is right. So what we've done here basically is quickly identify the answer option, or we fall back on the context where it appears and figure out the answer. Let's look at some antonyms. We looked at synonyms. Let's move on and look at some antonyms, right? Choose the word which is most nearly the opposite in meaning as the word given in bold as used in the passage. So, sound, that's the word, right? As soon as you look at the word sound, you can relate it to noise, you can relate to something really heavy or solid, right? So, concrete and noisy will be synonyms. I can quickly eliminate these options because we're looking at antonyms, opposite in meaning. So it could be silence, it could be calmness, maybe even loose, I don't know. So since I am not let's look at the context. Now the context from which this word appears is right below. Let's read. That shift would not just demonstrate that the Bank of Japan believes the world's second largest economy is now on sound footing, right? It comes here. It comes as an adjective to footing. It would also have a profound effect on global markets and both corporate and private borrowers. Strong, right? It has a strong foundation. So, if sound in the context is giving me the meaning of strong, right? What can be the opposite? Loose. So, that's why vocabulary questions we have to be one thing that you need to keep in mind. If it's an easy word and the options are too close, you have 2 or 3 options that are, almost can be the answer. It's always better to rely on the context. Yeah, let's look at one more. Again, choose the word which is most nearly. We're looking at an antonym here. Predecessor. This is not a difficult word, right? Obviously, predecessor means who. Like I can call an ancestor a predecessor, right? One who precedes another in time. So what's the opposite of predecessor, Vishal? Yes, successor, right? So this is an easy one. So words like this, words like emerged, predecessor, I don't have to really go through the entire passage to understand. I can quickly get 4 or 5 points. So when you approach reading comprehension and you attempt the vocabulary questions first, what you're doing is, we're talking about the saving time approaches, right? So the first thing that you're doing is, if it's a short passage and you have 2 questions on vocabulary, you have 2 marks already scored. If it's a long passage and if you have 6 questions, right? 3 antonyms, 3 synonyms, you have 6 marks in your kitty already, right? So that's the first thing. So we've looked at the first way. Let's move on. Let's look at what the second way is. Now, the second thing or approach that you can take when it comes to reading comprehension is to skim through questions to analyze the question type and then attempt skim questions. So what do I mean by skim questions? What is skim basically? A quick read, right? So I'm skimming through the questions and trying to understand, okay, what sort of questions? So I already know vocabulary questions because it will be very obvious. Now the other questions which will fall under this category can be, some question that says, okay, what's the title of the passage? Right? This can be a skim question. Or what can you infer from the passage? You have some 5-6 options. What can you infer? I hope you understand the meaning of infer. Right? So when I say infer, I'm saying, okay, there is some information given in the passage. Based on that, what is your conclusion? Right? Which option is correct? So what can you infer from the passage? That can be a skim question. Or what does this expression mean? Right? You have an expression within quotation marks, right? It's there in the passage, it's taken and there's a question on that. What does this expression mean? So these are all skim questions. Again, I don't need to read the entire passage. I can just quickly look at this. Obviously, for title of the passage, I'll tell you another strategy that we can look at. But when you say things like, what does this expression mean especially, right? Let's look at a question type in this category, right? So here's a question in front of you. It says, which of the following best describes the term quantitative easing as used in the passage? Okay, this is again from the long passage. The synonyms and antonyms that we looked at, it's the same passage. Quantitative easing. And I have 5 options, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's quickly read the options. Series of unorthodox measures, initiating superficial remedies, resorting to strategies to gain cheap popularity, pumping more money for hassle-free access, and none of these. So let's quickly look at the context where this passage comes. Reading. But Foucault stepped up or initiated a series of unorthodox quantitative easing programs designed to flood the market with easy money. So this particular expression is in the context and I'm looking at keywords around it, right? The programs were designed to do what? Flood the market with easy money. Okay, I've looked at this expression. I've looked at the sentence or the context in which it appears. I've understood what it means. Now I'm going to go back and look at my options and choose the right option. Right? And then the entire explanation is also kind of explained a little further with an example. It says, for example, he more than doubled the target for current account deposits held by financial institutions and he ramped up the Bank of Japan's purchases of corporate and government bonds. We don't even have to read that, but if you need more clarity, you can go ahead and do that. But my key phrase from the context is this. Going back to the question, from the options, what do you think is the answer? What does this expression mean? Quantitative easing. Is it series of unorthodox measures, Shivang? Is it initiating superficial remedies? Is it resorting to strategies to gain cheap popularity? Or is it pumping more money for hassle-free excess? Which one is it? Right? We just saw him giving the example as well. For example, he's doubled more money coming into the market. Right? That's it. You've gained another 1 mark in your kitty. Right? So, the first way, what would we say? We said, hey, I'm going to attempt vocabulary questions. I'm going to get some marks. Second, I'm going to look at questions that are asking me about the meaning of certain expressions. Again, I can focus on that particular sentence surrounding context, preceding statement, following statement, and understand the expression, meaning that the expression gives in the context. We're going to move on to what's our third way. We've almost come here to the third strategy. Now let's look at this. What I'm saying is focus on the topic sentence and the closing sentence in each paragraph to answer questions. Alright? So you will get an idea of what the passage is about when you pay attention to the topic sentence and closing sentence in each paragraph. Now if it's a short passage, you might have 3 paragraphs. If it's a long passage, you might have chunky paragraphs. It could be 3 or 5, right? So, topic sentence, it's the first sentence of the paragraph, right? Introductory sentence. So, ideally, a good writer, right, always starts off giving you what the gist of the paragraph is in the topic sentence, Reading the topic sentence, I know what the paragraph is going to be about, and closing sentence will kind of summarize it or expand on that. So it gives me an idea, right? Focus on topic sentence, closing sentence, each paragraph, answer questions. So these will help you with title. That's what he meant. Now let's look at a couple of examples, right? So let's read. What, according to the author, is the reason for the success of Indian national banks in this quarter? Okay, I have some 4 options and then E. Right, this is one question. What's the keyword here? Reason for the success of Indian national banks. So when you're reading the question, it's important for you to pay attention to keywords. What's the question revolving around? So when you're reading the passage, you know what to look for. Right? Next question, which of the following statements is definitely true in the context of the passage? And you have some 3 options, right? India has not been affected by the economic slowdown. Indian banks are showing growth in this quarter despite the recession. While banking industry in the West was severely affected by recession in the past, it is now gradually recovering and showing a positive growth. Okay, now let's quickly look at the paragraph and see if you are able to answer these 2 questions by only paying attention to the topic and the closing sentence. Okay, so this is the paragraph. This is how it starts. Alright, so the topic sentence says, despite the economic crunch worldwide that saw pulverization of some of the largest banking and finance giants, Indian banking houses have managed to show positive growth this quarter. Okay, that's the topic sentence. And then we have the closing sentence. Closing sentence says, people take solace in their investments in public sector, watching the bailout packages being cashed out by government all over the world to save big business houses. This is almost like the government is helping, right? If you need more clarity, you can just move to the previous sentence. One of the main reasons behind the success of these banks this quarter would be their direct banking by the governments of India. Right? So now we have an idea. We've just looked at the topic sentence and the closing sentence. Let's see if we are able to answer the questions. Right? The two questions that we saw quickly. The first question, it says, what according to the author is the reason for the success of Indian national banks this quarter? Remember, we just saw that, right? It specifically says the reason for the success is out of A, B, C, D. Which one do you think it is? We just read out the answer, in fact, from the closing sentence. Are any of you able to identify the answer option? It's right there in the closing sentence. The explanation is just in the previous sentence, surrounding context. D. Perfect. Next one, which of the following statements is definitely true in the context of the passage? We can close our eyes and select. Which one will you select? We just saw that it's there in the topic sentence. The answer is in the topic sentence, the first sentence that we read. Just to show you again, despite the economic crunch worldwide that saw pulverization of some of the largest banking and finance giants, Indian banking houses have managed to show positive growth this quarter. So what do you think is the answer out of this? Yes, Karthikeyan again, right? Only B. Actually, when you again spend time reading just the topic sentence and closing sentence, you'll realize that you will be able to answer one or two questions by just focusing on that as well. Yeah? So, B, not to worry, right? Since the IBPS prelims prayers are on the corner, we wanted to focus on that. We can definitely have a session for clerks as well, but probably we'll focus on something more complicated because the difficulty level is slightly lower in the clerk exams, right? Yeah, so are you following? So what we've done here is, the third strategy that we've seen is to focus on the topic and closing sentence. Now, I want to leave you with, like I said, I want to leave you with some tips. Let's look at that. Okay. Now, tip 1, I don't want you to allow new and unfamiliar words, right? You're reading the passage, you come across a word that you have no idea or no clue of. Don't let that stop you from understanding the main message or theme of the passage, right? Continue reading. Get the gist of the passage. You can always apply context clues and figure out the meaning. Yeah. Second tip, usually the sequence of the questions will follow the passage. So which means first and second question, you can ideally find the answer in the first paragraph, right? Usually the sequence of the questions will follow the passage sequence. So it makes it easier for you to look for answers. You don't have to break your head. There are exceptions, of course. I'm not saying no, but the pattern is pretty much the same. Tip 3, focus on keywords from the questions. So when you're reading the passage, you look for those keywords, right? And then you can also pay attention to surrounding context. I want to spend time on this last tip, tip 3. I think it's important, right? We're going to look at a couple of questions to understand this. I want you to first register these tips, right? So what we're saying is, hey, while I am reading the questions, I am going to focus on the keywords. And then, so when I'm reading the passage, I look for those keywords, right? Yeah, so ideally it's better for you to read the questions for you to get an idea. So we're going to look at, there are two questions that I've put in front of you, right? Let's look at this question. What, according to the author, will be a big boon in the days to come? What's the keyword in this question? Can someone identify the keyword? When I say keyword, that's what the question is revolving around. Big boon, right? We have the keyword. Let's look at the next question. Which of the following strengthens the finance minister's statements about the sound health of Indian banks with respect to the passage? In the second question, what's the keyword? What's the keyword in the second question? What is the question asking about? Sound health. Yes. Super. So we have the keywords now. So this is tip 3 we are following, right? We are focusing on the keywords from the question. So when we are reading the passage, we're only going to pay attention to where these keywords appear in the passage. So we'll focus on that sentence. We might also focus on the preceding or the following sentence. Not a problem, right? So now we're going to quickly look at the passage. Yeah, ready? Where these two keywords are appearing. Okay, reading. So the first one is said big boon, right? So it's appearing right here in the third sentence. So let's read. It says, this can be seen as a big boon in the days to come. So what is that this? I have to read obviously the previous sentence, right? So let's read. While others are on a cost-cutting spree and firing employees, Indian companies are actually working on boosting staffing, which means they're hiring in banking and broking sectors, right? So this, what is that this? That the Indian companies are hiring in spite of something else happening in the world, right? We have our answer right there. Let's go back and look at our options. Choose the answer quickly. Let's read A, B, C, D, E. A, the economy coming back on the fast track, the slowing down of the economy, increased hiring in Indian financial sector in times of economic slowdown, the cost cutting carried out by all the companies. What's the answer? So basically what we've done is, we focused on the keyword, we looked at the context, we read the surrounding context, we figured out the answer. Let's look at the second question. Which of the following strengthens the... Let's go back to the passage. Reading. What is our keyword? Sound health of all Indian banks. Right? Here it is. Let's read. We read the sentence first where it appears. The finance minister has assured Indian public about the sound health of all Indian banks. How is he assured? What is the result? This, which one? The sound health of the Indian banks, he is assured. This could also be evident from the fact that there have been no mergers and takeovers in Indian banking sector, in a contrast to world scenario, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And we are definitely not looking at that, rather we're looking for growth, right? So I have two things here, 2 points here. Remember these points. There have been no mergers and takeovers, looking for growth. And initially also when we looked at the first topic sentence of this passage, when we started, right? I hope you remember that. Remember this? Despite the economic crunch worldwide that saw polarization of some of the largest banking, what's happening? Indian banking houses have managed to show positive growth in this quarter, right? Now, answer the second question. Which of the following strengthens the finance minister's statement about the sound health of Indian banks with respect to the passage? A, there have been no acquisitions and mergers of Indian banks? Yes. The Indian banks are recording a positive growth? Yes. Layoffs have been observed worldwide? Well, if you read the passage, you know that there is no mention of layoffs. So obviously, the answer is A and B. So these are all tips that I have shared in order for you to save time and maximize your chances of scoring or getting additional marks when it comes to reading comprehension, right? So, quick recap, we said, hey, we'll attempt vocabulary questions first. 2, we'll analyze the question type and we'll answer questions pertaining to, expressions, idiomatic expressions or whatever is highlighted in the passage. 3rd, we said we're going to focus on topic sentence and closing sentence to answer a couple of questions. Now, tip 3, what we said is, there are keywords in the questions which we need to pay attention to. So, when we're reading the passage, we focus on those keywords where it appears, that sentence, preceding sentence, following sentence. However, you're not able to locate is only because you're not focusing. Alright? You read the questions, you get an idea, you know what your keywords are, and you look for that specifically. The problem when it comes to reading comprehension is, you kind of tend to lose concentration. Right? When you're reading, I know a lot of, even me for that matter, sometimes I get distracted. I'm reading the passage and my thoughts are all over the place. I'm not focusing on the passage. And then after a minute, I realize that I didn't understand anything that I read. I have to go back and read. Right? I'm wasting time there. So, the idea is, the keywords in the questions are not going to be highlighted. Only vocabulary questions and expression related questions are going to be highlighted in the passage. But the others, we just need to pay a little more attention while we are reading the passage. Yeah? So, what to do? Like I said, the mantra, you need to make reading a lifestyle. Now, these are all quick tips, good to know stuff, right, during the time of the exam. But, unless and until you kind of make reading a lifestyle and improve your reading fluency. So, the reason why I put these two, your reading fluency will include speed, your speed of reading, right? And did you understand what you read? Comprehension. Which means what you need to do is, there's something called words per minute, right? You need to focus on what is your words per minute. How many words can you actually read in a minute, understanding what you read, right? So an average person can read about 200 to 250 words per minute with maybe 60% comprehension, right? What you can aim for, especially when it comes to reading comprehension as a section in the exam, right? You need to really aim for obviously more than this, because your passage word count itself is how much? 350 or 450, and if it's a long passage, it's going to be at least 650. Yeah, so keeping that in mind, you need to work on your reading fluency as a whole. On the whole, this is what you need to do. So the idea behind reading comprehension, what we looked at is, especially for people who completely discard this question type, you just don't even attempt it. That's something that you can avoid. You don't have to do that, right? You can go ahead and attempt in the manner in which I asked you to attempt. Attempt the vocabulary questions first, get 5 or 6 marks there, right? You're not wasting a lot of time reading the entire passage. Look at expressions that have been highlighted. There could be 1 or 2 questions on that. Answer that first, because you're spending time only reading where it appears, that particular sentence, right? Then you can focus on topic sentence, closing sentence to answer a couple of other questions too, right? Apart from this, like I said, so these are all tips where you can avoid completely not attempting reading comprehension. Yeah, but as a habit, for you to just ensure that your reading is in place, right? Ma'am, I have a problem, I can't read fast, or I have a problem understanding what I read. That is something that you need to work on a regular basis, on a daily basis. Yeah, hopefully you will attempt reading comprehension, right? The idea is to not work towards the cutoff, but look at how I can maximize my score in the exam. What is the maximum score that I can get, right? That should be your aim. Yeah, so keep that in mind. We're looking at specific question types in the English section, right? If finding errors or phrase substitution or sentence improvement is a challenge for you, RC would be an easier option if you ask me. I think it's just a mental block that students have, saying, okay, it's too long, I'm not even going to attempt. You think it's going to take a lot of time, but ideal time for RC, honestly, whatever time is given, you work lesser than that, right? You keep a lesser time. So if you ask me if the word count is about 350 word count, right? Ideally, you should be able to analyze the questions within a minute, read the paragraph itself less than 2 minutes. So that's, let's say, a total of 3 minutes there. And you need to just take about 1 or 2 minutes max to answer the questions. So if you ask me a short passage, you should be able to complete it in 5 minutes. I know it looks or it seems far-fetched and unattainable, but it's not actually. If you look at the vocabulary questions, let's say there's 5 marks, you can easily get at least 2 or 3 marks if out of 5, right? So 5 minutes short passage, long passage, practice when you're practicing with time. Should we start with RC in exam, Sandy? Honestly, there is no specific question type that you need to answer first. I would say whatever you're comfortable with. If you're really good in fill in the blanks, do that first, right? I'm assuming all of you are taking a lot of tests. You're practicing, taking a lot of tests. So by now you know what your strength is, which question type you're really good at, which question type is really a challenging area for you. You still need some time to practice, right? So based on that, you work your strategy. It'll be different for different people. So I can't say all of you attempt fill in the blanks first, or all of you attempt finding errors first. That's an incorrect strategy to, say to everybody, right? Idioms we've already taken, right? There's a lot of good articles that are there. You can definitely make use of that. Just read books. I don't know how many of you read a lot of, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, or just read books. But otherwise, if you're not a person, I can't sit with a novel and read, that's fine. Then look at it as a complete strategy only for clearing the exam, right? And read the newspapers. But I think it's a good practice, right? It'll help you in your general awareness and current affairs as well when you read newspapers. That's all we have for the session. Hope this was an effective session. Continue practicing, and I will see you guys with another interesting topic in the next session. All right, take care.
I'm Rohit, and here's your daily dose of aptitude skills. In this session, we are going to look at how to find an approximate square root, which is a common question that we generally come across in various bank exams. Right? Let's take an example to understand this. Let's say we have to find out the square root of 6,000. Now we very well know that this is not a perfect square, right? Had it been a perfect square, we would have followed the original technique, that is how to get the square root of a given number, which we have seen in one of our earlier videos.
What we're basically going to do in this session is we're going to quickly look at what are the top 10 errors that you need to know, right? Mostly having gone through most of the bank exams, whether it's IBPS, SSC or any other bank exams, these are some of the common types of errors that keep appearing. So I thought it would be better if we focus on this to start with, right? There are other error types also you can be aware of, but I think it's a good starting point if you are completely aware of what these error types are, so you'll know what to look for when you approach this particular question type. So that's exactly what we're going to do.